The night air outside Altamira Global Holdings was dense with fog, wrapping the towering glass building in a kind of quiet reverence. The city never truly slept, but this corner of Midtown was hushed, too corporate, too high above the grind to hear it. Inside, however, the polished marble floors gleamed under motion-activated lights, and the only footsteps echoing through the executive wing belonged to a man no one ever noticed. Elijah Brooks, dressed in navy blue janitorial coveralls, pushed his cart silently past a closed conference room. A damp mop leaned against the side, a trash grabber nestled beside a half-empty spray bottle. He wore headphones in one ear, jazz mostly, and his gloved hands moved in a rhythm that suggested he'd done this walk 1,000 times. Because he had. Elijah had worked the night shift for 3 years now. While the rest of the building buzzed with acquisitions, forecasts, and calls across time zones, he arrived each evening through the underground service elevator. He wasn't even technically an employee of Altamira. His badge was stamped with a third-party cleaning service logo, his name misspelled slightly, and no one had ever bothered to correct it. But Elijah noticed everything. He noticed the security guard's limp worsening on rainy nights. He noticed when the office manager swapped the espresso pods for cheaper ones. He noticed when executives stayed long past their usual hours, when their stress lingered in the air like expensive cologne. And on this particular night, he noticed something else. Room 47B had been left open. It was one of the executive conference rooms on the top floor. Only C-suite executives used it, especially for sensitive meetings with overseas investors. The room wasn't on his usual list, but someone had clearly forgotten to lock it after the evening's gathering. A half-drunk espresso cup sat on the main table, lipstick stain still fresh. The scent of overworked air conditioning clung to the long leather chairs. Elijah hesitated, then stepped inside. He didn't mean to snoop, but the trash needed emptying, and the lights turned on automatically, illuminating the table cluttered with papers, USB drives, water bottles, and empty plates of catered sushi. He moved quietly, collecting wrappers and placing bottles into the recycling bin. That's when he saw it. A thick packet of paper, half spilled from a leather portfolio. He leaned in. Accord de Partenariat Grupo Thales, Altamira, GH. The title was in bold, the logo crisp and sharp. French. Elijah's pulse fluttered in his ears. He hadn't read legal French in a long time, not since he was 23 and still convinced he'd graduate with honors in international law. But habits, especially intellectual ones, die slow. He scanned the first few lines. Clauses, corporate structure terms, legal jargon. Then something odd caught his eye. Clause 7.3. Nomination exceptionnelle en cas de falsification de données. In the event of discovered falsification of financial data, the foreign party reserves the right to request temporary executive oversight by a certified legal translator and liaison possessing knowledge of French law and corporate compliance. Elijah's fingers tightened around the page. He looked around, heart racing. The cleaning cart stood in the doorway like a sentinel. The building was mostly empty now, save for late-working managers and the occasional IT guy patching servers. He wasn't supposed to read this. He certainly wasn't supposed to understand it. He made a decision. Not reckless, not rebellious, just quietly desperate. Elijah pulled out his phone, snapped 3 photos of the page, then returned the packet exactly as he found it. He didn't know what this clause meant exactly, but he understood enough to feel something wasn't right. As he left the room, he took one last glance at the dark monitor in the corner, its screen reflecting his silhouette. A janitor, a ghost, no one. Elijah's apartment was 10 stops away on the queue line, small, dimly lit, with aging wallpaper that peeled in the corners like tired leaves. His sister, Maya, was asleep on the pull-out couch, textbooks scattered around her. She was 16, in her second year of high school, and already smarter than he ever was at that age. He tiptoed past her and settled at the small dining table, where an old laptop sat humming softly. He didn't check social media. He didn't watch videos. He opened a folder titled Fall 2013 Legal Studies, dusted off from his university years. Elijah had once been someone else. He'd been on track for a joint JD LLM in international commercial law, spoke French, passable German, wrote essays about EU merger regulations and studied under professors who believed he'd end up at The Hague. But then, his mother was diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer. His father was gone. The bills swallowed them whole. Elijah left law school with 2 semesters to go and took the first job that paid in cash. Now he mopped floors, but the language returned as if it had never left him. Words like indemnité, juridique, conformité contractuelle flowed back into his brain like muscle memory. He didn't sleep that night. Not really. The next morning at Altamira, there was a shift in the air. The receptionist, usually all lip gloss and small talk, looked unusually tense. There were whispers of a surprise visit. Something about Madame S., the company's CEO, returning from Brussels a week earlier than expected. Elena Silver was legend. Billionaire, founder, Harvard grad, a woman who once won a hostile takeover with a single boardroom speech and was known for firing an entire division over a confidentiality breach. The staff both feared and revered her. Most had never even seen her. Elijah saw her that afternoon. He was pushing his cart past the east corridor when the executive elevator chimed open. 2 men in suits exited first, murmuring in rushed tones, and then she stepped out. Steel gray suit, barely there makeup, no jewelry except for a platinum watch. Her walk was sharp, her posture flawless, her expression unreadable. But when her gaze met Elijah's, she paused. He realized he was standing in her way. Sorry, he mumbled, backing the cart into the wall. She didn't speak, just looked down at his badge, squinted slightly, then walked past without a word. But a curious thing happened. One of the pages from the packet he had photographed was still in the side pocket of his cart. It slipped loose, fluttering to the floor as she walked past. Elijah bent to grab it. Too late. Elena picked it up. She turned it over, read the heading. Her brows twitched. "Where did you get this?" she asked, voice like frost. Elijah's throat dried. "It was left in the conference room. I was just cleaning." She held his gaze. "You read French?" "A little," he lied. Her lips curled into something like amusement. "A janitor with an eye for legalese." She handed the paper back. "Be careful what you read, Mr. Brooks. Some things can't be unread." Then she turned and left. Elijah stood frozen for a long time, long after she was gone, long after his shift ended. He still wasn't sure what he'd stepped into, but whatever it was already too late to walk away. By the time Elijah arrived home, a low gray rain had settled over the city like a wet coat. He barely noticed. His mind was still in that corridor, still hearing her voice, cold and precise. "Be careful what you read." He laid the papers on his chipped kitchen table and stared at the blurry images on his phone. The clause he'd photographed repeated itself in his mind like a whisper. Temporary executive oversight. Certified legal translator. Falsification of data. His first instinct had been fear, but now, curiosity, determination, maybe even duty. He dug through old boxes in the closet, pulling out dusty binders labeled in thick black ink. International legal codes, European trade regulations, French corporate law. Pages he hadn't touched in years felt like familiar ground. He retrieved a red pen and began translating the photographed contract line by line onto a legal pad. It wasn't perfect. The legalese was dense, the formatting complex, but the structure was unmistakable. Clause 7.3 wasn't an afterthought. It was a trapdoor. If the French investment group suspected anything false in Altamira's reports, they could legally take control, temporarily, but enough to demand leadership changes, enough to freeze accounts, enough to bring down an empire. And, worst of all, someone at Altamira knew that. This clause wasn't public. It wasn't in the summaries shared with the board or stakeholders. It was buried in the French version of the agreement, hidden in language most of the company's lawyers didn't even read fluently. It was deception by omission. Elijah needed help. He couldn't go to HR, couldn't go to his supervisor at the cleaning service. He needed someone inside, but someone with a conscience. There was only one name he knew from observation: Carmen Larson. She worked in finance. Quiet, kept to herself, lived off black coffee, and never smiled at jokes in meetings. Elijah had seen her pace the break room during audits, eyes darting over spreadsheets, chewing on pen caps like they were stress relief. That morning, as executives flooded the lobby in their usual click-clack of heels and briefcases, he waited by the service elevator until she passed with her stack of folders. "Miss Larson," he said quietly. She turned, surprised. I'm Elijah, from Knights. I know this is weird, but can I ask you something about a contract? French-based, Thales Group." Her brows pulled together. "How do you know that name?" "I found something, not officially, just it was left out. I translated a part of it." Her eyes narrowed. "You read French?" "I studied it. Law, too. Before you cleaned floors?" He didn't answer. She watched him for a moment longer than felt safe, then said, "Meet me after hours. 9th floor, conference room C. Don't bring the original." That night, the floor was quiet again. Elijah waited in conference room C, heart hammering as the minutes ticked past. When Carmen entered, she was alone, holding her laptop and a folder labeled Reconciliations, Internal Only. "I don't know what you saw," she said, "but I've suspected for months." She dropped the folder on the table. Inside were side-by-side printouts, reported earnings versus internal ledgers. There were gaps, massive ones. They report growth, but the product lines aren't moving. Warehouses marked full that we haven't used in over a year. Numbers that change just in time for quarterly calls. "And the clause in the French contract," Elijah began, "means if they audit us, we're dead," Carmen finished. "Why hide it?" "Because Elena needs this deal to close. She's leveraged us. If it falls through, stock crashes, partners back out, we bleed." "Does she know?" "She's not stupid," Carmen said, "but I don't know how deep it goes." Elijah sat back. "I already sent the clause, a message, to one of the Thales directors, in French." "You what?" "I didn't accuse anyone. I just translated the clause. Pointed out the risks. Attached the evidence. You realize they could shut us down, freeze everything." He nodded. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. "Because no one else was going to." The next morning, Elijah was sweeping the lobby when he heard it. "Elena Silver, conference room A, now." Her voice sliced through the intercom like a blade. The staff froze. Even the security guard looked up from his newspaper. 3 hours passed, then 4. At lunch, Carmen texted him from an unlisted number. They got the message. Audit team flying in. French. Elena is livid. You should keep your head down. But Elijah didn't keep his head down. He kept translating, kept gathering clauses and dates and inconsistencies. He had no plan, no leverage, only truth. And then, at 3:17 p.m., his badge flashed red at the service door. Blocked. 2 guards met him at the side corridor and escorted him upstairs. No words, no warning. He was led into a room he had never seen before, Elena's private office. She stood behind her desk, arms folded, eyes like sharpened glass. "I should fire you," she said. Elijah met her gaze. "You read a clause not meant for you. You shared it with outsiders. That's grounds for dismissal, lawsuit even." He didn't flinch. "So, do it." She tilted her head. "But first," he added, "maybe ask yourself why I was the only one who read it." Silence. "You buried the clause. You bet the company on fake numbers, and you hoped no one would notice. I noticed. Because I still believe companies should be honest." Elena's nostrils flared, her jaw tensed. "I could end you, you know that?" she said. "Then do it," Elijah said, "but that won't unsend the message." She turned away, facing the city skyline. "You think you're a hero?" she asked. "No. I just think someone had to be the floor beneath your pedestal." She laughed. It was short, bitter. Then, without turning around, she said, "The auditors land tomorrow. You forced my hand." "I didn't force anything. I just cleaned up the mess you left behind." Another silence. Then, "You'll meet them. If you're so fluent, you can translate the meeting, word for word. But if you lie, if you embellish, you're done." Elijah nodded. "Then it's a deal." The French audit team arrived at dawn. 3 figures in dark overcoats, wheeled suitcases, and efficient expressions stepped into the glass-paneled lobby of Altamira Global Holdings with the quiet menace of a storm front. One held a manila folder thick with documents. Another carried a laptop case that had probably never held anything but spreadsheets. The third, Mathieu Laurent, head legal advisor to Tala's group, walked as though he already knew the outcome. From the 22nd floor, Elijah watched them arrive. He was no longer wearing his janitor's uniform. Elena Silver had ordered a temporary ID badge for him. No logo, no rank, just his name and the word liaison. He now sat in a makeshift office 2 floors below the executive suites, tucked between a shuttered marketing room and an unused video conference center. It smelled faintly of dry carpet and corporate survival. At 8:32 a.m., he was summoned. The main boardroom had been transformed overnight. Projection screens, bottled water in neat rows, printed agendas placed in front of every chair. Elena Silver sat at the head of the table in a slate-gray power suit, flanked by her legal team, PR advisor, and one visibly uncomfortable CFO. Carmen sat near the back, typing notes and trying to avoid eye contact. Elijah took his seat beside Laurent. No one acknowledged him. Laurent opened the meeting in French. "Nous sommes ici pour confirmer l'intégrité de cette transaction. Ce que nous avons reçu comme données semblent trop propres." Elijah took his seat beside Laurent. No one acknowledged him. Laurent opened the meeting in French. "Nous sommes ici pour confirmer l'intégrité de cette transaction. Ce que nous avons reçu comme données semblent trop propres." Elijah's voice was steady. "He says they're here to verify the integrity of the deal. He finds the numbers suspiciously clean." No one responded. Elena simply nodded for him to continue. Laurent turned to his team and whispered something. Then he pulled out a printed version of the contract. the same one Elijah had read in the empty conference room. He flipped to clause 7.3 and laid it flat. Nous avons reçu une traduction indépendante de ce passage, et disons-le franchement, cela nous alarme. He says they've had clause 7.3 independently translated, and to be frank, it alarmed them. Elijah felt every eye in the room shift toward him, even if none admitted it. Laurent continued, firmer now. S'il y a eu falsification, nous appliquerons cette clause. Le contrat le permet. If there has been falsification, they will invoke the clause. The contract allows it. Elena lifted her eyes from the page for the first time. And what if we cooperate? She asked coolly. Elijah paused, translating. Laurent folded his hands, replied softly, Alors nous pouvons envisager une transition avec assistance transparente. If Altamira cooperates, Elijah translated, they are willing to consider a transition, with assistance. Transparent. It was the first time that word had been used out loud. Transition. A polite euphemism for internal collapse. Over the next 48 hours, Elijah became a fixture in every meeting. He translated depositions, email threads, manufacturing logs. He sat through interrogations with department heads who'd once mocked him by the vending machine. He witnessed Elena Silver lose her temper twice, once at the PR head for fabricating growth numbers, once at her own CFO for optimistic rounding. But he also saw something else. Elena didn't flinch. She didn't run. She didn't cry, blame, or spin. She took the truth like a knife to the ribs, quick, clean, and with eyes wide open. On the second night, he was walking the long hallway between offices when she appeared beside him. You were right, she said without preamble. I buried that clause, not to deceive, to delay. I thought I'd fix the numbers before anyone noticed. You almost did, Elijah said. I underestimated you. Everyone did. They walked in silence for a few moments. Do you think, she said, that it matters? What? The truth? Elijah turned to her. It has to. Otherwise, we're all just mopping up lies. For the first time, Elena smiled. Not fully, but enough. The French auditors concluded their initial assessment by the end of the week. Laurent stood before the board, this time speaking slowly enough for Elijah to translate without pause. Les chiffres ont été manipulés. Mais nous avons observé une volonté de transparence récente. The figures were manipulated, but there is now evidence of a genuine effort toward transparency. Nous recommandons la mise en place d'un cadre de surveillance externe, nouveau comité, nouveau départ. We recommend an external oversight framework, a new committee, a fresh start. The boardroom fell silent. Then one of the shareholders spoke. And who would chair that oversight? Laurent's eyes moved deliberately toward Elijah. Quelqu'un qui comprend les deux mondes, la langue et la vérité. Someone who understands both worlds, the language and the truth. The implication hung heavy. Elijah looked around the table, at men and women who still saw him as the janitor, then at Elena. She didn't speak, but she nodded just once. In the days that followed, Altamira reshaped itself. Executives were reassigned or quietly dismissed. Entire departments were audited. New protocols were written in English and French. The liaison badge on Elijah's desk was replaced with a new one. Ethics and Compliance Officer. Elena's name remained on the building. Her reputation would never be the same, but neither would the company. And as for Elijah, he was no longer the man who pushed the cart. He was the man who read between the lines, who called the bluff, who stood when no one else did. One night, As he packed his bag after an 11-hour day reviewing procurement contracts, Carmen tapped gently on his door. "You should take a break," she said. He looked up, eyes tired but calm. "Not yet." She paused. "You know, people keep asking me if you're working for Elena or for Thalas. And what do you tell them?" "I tell them, maybe you're just working for the truth." He smiled, then turned back to his notes. 3 months later, Altamira's headquarters looked the same from the outside. Still steel and glass, still towering, still imposing. But inside, the air had changed. There was something different in the way the receptionist answered the phone, the way analysts moved through the halls, the way the boardroom no longer felt like a war zone. The difference wasn't in design. It was in integrity. Elijah Brooks walked through the main floor with a thin leather briefcase under one arm and a thermos of black coffee in his hand. The badge on his chest no longer read Temporary Liaison. It now bore a solid silver strip beneath his name. Elijah Brooks, Director of Ethics and Legal Compliance. He still wore the same watch from his cleaning days, still tied his shoes the same way, but the man inside the clothes had shifted. No one called him the janitor anymore. Altamira's internal transformation hadn't been flashy. There were no press conferences, no viral posts, no self-congratulatory celebrations. It had been quiet and grueling, departments restructured, contracts reviewed, long nights in legal war rooms filled with audit teams and late-arriving pizza. Elijah oversaw most of it, not as a figurehead, but as a translator, in every sense of the word. He translated between languages, between departments, between what had been and what had to be. With Elena's backing, he established a compliance unit built with young, sharp, ethically driven minds. He personally interviewed every new hire. If they asked what the job was about, he told them one thing: catching lies before they cost lives. It wasn't poetic, but it worked. But reform never comes without resistance. Whispers started about former executives angry at their exile, about former allies of Elena, once protected by her silence, now quietly sharpening their knives. One night, a shipping delay threatened a $4.8 million order. The paperwork had mysteriously gone missing. A new audit revealed a single forged signature. It was sabotage, deliberate, coordinated. Elijah knew where to look. The name that kept surfacing, Lars Whitaker, former VP of Operations, fired after the audit and still bitter. He still had access to old vendors, old systems, and more importantly, old grudges. Elijah brought the file to Elena's desk. She read it silently. "You want to go after him?" she asked. "No," Elijah said. "I want to lock every door he still thinks he has the key to." She didn't smile, but she approved the plan. Within 72 hours, every vendor was re-verified, security credentials overhauled, and a federal complaint filed anonymously. The shipment moved. The system held. Another crisis survived. That Friday, Elijah took the afternoon off for the first time in months. He took the train home to pick up Maya, his sister, now 17, whose grades were good enough for early admission into 3 universities. She wore his old backpack and beamed as she adjusted her glasses. "You sure I'm allowed?" she asked as they reached the Altamira entrance. "You're with the ethics department," Elijah said. "We don't lie." He gave her the full tour: the new legal library, the glass-walled conference rooms, the pantry that now had more than just stale coffee. She stopped at a bulletin board near the employee lounge and pointed to a newspaper clipping taped there. "Whistleblower saves Altamira from collapse." "I still can't believe this was you," she whispered. Elijah didn't respond. He just watched her. When they got to the executive floor, he showed her the view. "It's weird," he said. "I used to mop this hallway. Now I approve policy here." Maya turned to him, smiling wide. "You earned it." As they exited the elevator, Elijah saw someone down the hall. A new janitor, maybe 19, hunched over a mop bucket, earbuds in, sleeves rolled up, the same uniform Elijah had once worn. He walked over. "Hey," Elijah said. The kid, startled, pulled out an earbud. "Sorry, didn't hear you, sir." Elijah smiled. "It's fine. Just wanted to say, if you ever need a quiet place to study, the 11th floor lounge has the best Wi-Fi. Trust me." The kid blinked. Thanks?" Elijah nodded and walked away. Maya stared at him. "You just gave him your old hiding spot." "Yeah," Elijah said. "Everyone needs one." That evening, Elijah found Elena alone in the executive boardroom, standing at the far window, overlooking the city. He knocked once on the doorframe. "You're quiet these days," she said. "Just busy trying to keep us honest." She turned. "Do you regret sending that letter?" He didn't answer right away. "No," he said, "but sometimes I wish I hadn't waited." She nodded slowly. This company was built on speed, growth, winning. I forgot that it also has to be built on something that doesn't move. "Truth," Elijah said. "Exactly." She looked at him again, longer this time. "I was going to replace you after the audit," she admitted. "Someone with credentials, with experience." "I know. But no one else knew how to walk through fire without running." He didn't respond. He didn't need to. She picked up a manila envelope from the table. "Next quarter, we're expanding into North Africa. French-speaking markets, legal contracts, policy negotiations. I want you to lead it." He looked down at the envelope. "I'm not your yes man." "I don't want one," she said. "I want the guy who made me rewrite my legacy." Weeks passed, then months. Altamira struck new deals, with cleaner books, with better partners, with slower but sustainable growth. The press called it a controlled miracle. Investors called it the most responsible pivot in the last decade. But for Elijah Brooks, it was simpler. It was justice. It was redemption. It was the life he was supposed to live before everything went wrong, and the one he built when he finally stood up for what was right. Every Friday, he stayed late to review contracts, and every now and then, when no one was around, he would walk down to the janitor's locker room and sit on the old bench where he used to eat his lunch in silence. The mop closet still smelled the same. But now it wasn't a cage. It was a reminder that sometimes, to fix something broken, you have to start with the floor beneath your feet. If this story moved you like it moved us, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We share powerful stories about ordinary people who changed everything when no one believed in them. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear what part of the world you're joining us from.